Harbor City, airport, early morning. A plane from Aurora Atlantic has just landed, and amid the bustling crowd, something strange unfolds. The entire flight crew, from the captain to the head flight attendant, is being escorted out of the first-class cabin by security under the shocked gaze of hundreds of passengers. And there, sitting quietly in seat 1A, a black man watches in silence. His name is Darius Cole, CEO of a billion-dollar medical technology company. Just 20 minutes earlier, Darius had been forced to give up that very same seat, 1A, first class, to make room for a white passenger, someone they called a regular. No one knew that the phone in Darius's jacket pocket had been recording everything. And just 5 minutes after the plane landed, the truth went public. It wasn't a disruptive passenger. It was an entire system crumbling before the quiet justice of one calm man. This isn't just a story about a first-class seat. It's a story about dignity, about how one man's silence can make the whole world listen. If you believe that justice doesn't need to be loud, hit like, share, and subscribe, because right now, you're about to witness silent justice unfold on Aurora Atlantic Flight 1857, Harbor City, late morning. A plane from Aurora Atlantic Airways has just landed. Outside, the ocean wind lashes against the gleaming metal body of Jet AA 1857. Inside the cabino, one speaks. People just stare. Security officers in black uniforms quietly step aboard, leading out 3 flight attendants and a captain, each bowing their heads as they're escorted from first class. No shouting, no resistance, only silence, so heavy you can hear the echo of footsteps on the floor. The man in seat 1A remains still. His gaze is calm, his hands resting neatly on his knees, no wasted motion. His name is Darius Cole, CEO of Quantum Sage Technologies, a multi-billion-dollar medical tech company, one of the few black men on the Fortune 500 list. Every passenger looks at him, trying to guess what just happened. But only he knows 20 minutes ago. He was the one being dragged from that very seat, 20 minutes earlier, on a flight departing from Crown Port International Airport. Darius had taken his seat, as clearly printed on his ticket. He buckled his seatbelt, opened his tablet, and reviewed the final slides of his presentation, the pitch that could secure a $300 million investment from Kingsbridge Capital, a meeting that might change the future of global health care. Then a man approached, Bradley Carter, white, about 40, gray suit, heavy cologne. "Excuse me," he said. "You're in my seat. This is 1A." His tone wasn't openly rude, but it carried that quiet arrogance that thickens the air. Darius looked up and held out his ticket. "No," he said evenly. "This is my seat." Bradley frowned, studying him not like a person, but like a probability. A flight attendant, Chloe Sanders, walked over. She glanced at the ticket, then turned toward Bradley with a polished, professional smile. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Carter," she said. "We'll take care of this immediately." Darius waited for her to check the system. She didn't. Instead, she stood between them and whispered to another attendant. He must have boarded the wrong flight. From the other side of the cabin, Lauren Mitchell, the head flight attendant, stepped in. Her smile was the kind reserved for small problems that need to disappear quickly. "Sir," she said, "you might be in the wrong seat. We can find you another one so we can depart on time." Darius stayed calm. "I'm not mistaken," he replied. "This is seat 1A. He placed the ticket on the table. Lauren didn't even glance at it. She looked at Bradley, then at Chloe. Both nodded. Now, the first-class cabin began to pay attention. A few stares, curious, judgmental, impatient. That feeling was all too familiar to Darius. From Silicon Valley boardrooms to Wall Street galas, those eyes always said the same thing. He's impressive. But when Captain Robert Ellison emerged from the cockpit, Darius knew what was coming. The captain's voice was brisk, commanding. "We need to depart on schedule. If you don't comply, we'll have to ask you to leave the flight." Darius met his eyes. There was no anger, only fatigue. "Then I'll leave," he said quietly. "But I'd like a refund and a record of this incident." "You can call customer service after landing," the captain replied, cold and dismissive. A few passengers nodded slightly, as if approving the removal of a troublemaker. Darius stood, moved slowly, said nothing. They reassigned him to row 34, the middle seat between a large man and a college student wearing headphones. No one noticed when, in that moment. He turned on his phone's camera, recording silently from the pocket of his suit jacket. From a few rows back, two attendants whispered, "I don't get why people like that always think they belong in first class." A small comment, but it landed deep, right where old wounds lived. He remembered his father's voice from Newark's son. "You'll have to be twice as good, just to get halfway there. If it were me, I might have lost my temper, but he didn't." Darius Cole never believed that anger could fix prejudice. He believed in truth, and truth, he knew, always finds its own voice. When the plane landed, everyone thought the story was over. But then, two security officers appeared, accompanied by a woman in a blue suit, Valerie Chen, vice president of Aurora Atlantic. The cabin went dead silent. Everyone thought they're here for the black man, but they walked straight to the front and stopped at seat 1A. Valerie leaned down to Bradley Carter. "Mr. Carter," she said softly, "please come with us." The air cracked open. Lauren and Chloe went pale. A young woman from business class Madison Clark stepped forward, holding up her phone. "I work for Aurora Atlantic," she said. "I recorded everything. Seat 1A belongs to Mr. Darius Cole." Time froze. Bradley stood still, then quietly gathered his belongings. Valerie turned back and bowed slightly toward Darius. "Mr. Cole," she said, "on behalf of the airline, we sincerely apologize. Please, return to your seat." No one spoke, only the sound of shallow breathing and shifting eyes. Darius walked forward and sat back down in his seat. He didn't look at anyone. He simply took out his phone and stopped the recording. On the screen, a notification appeared. "Upload complete." As the security team escorted the crew out of the cabin, sunlight streamed through the window, lighting his face serene, untouched by anger, as if he had known all along that justice doesn't need to shout to be heard. This, he thought, is what justice looks like. He didn't have to fight. He just sat still and let the truth do its job. 2 hours before that fateful flight took off, Harbor City was still draped in morning fog. Hundreds of miles away, in Crownport, the first rays of dawn streamed through the glass of a penthouse on the 48th floor. Light slid across a walnut desk, catching the engraved logo Quantum Sage Technologies. Inside that room, Darius Cole had been up since 5 a.m. He wore a light gray suit. His father's vintage watch clasped around his wrist a worn heirloom. He never boarded an important meeting without. When he looked in the mirror, there was no display of power in his eyes, only something quieter readiness. He slipped his laptop into a leather case and checked his presentation one last time. The title still glowed on the screen, Quantum Sage Med AI, turning data into healing. Quantum Sage wasn't just a company. It was his creation built from nothing, from a rented room in Newark, from a boy who grew up in East Bridge, where every winter meant choosing between heat or dinner, to a CEO invited to speak at the United Nations. That journey wasn't made of luck. It was built on discipline and memory. When he was little, his father used to tell him every night before bed, "You don't get to be angry, son. They want you to lose control so they can prove they're right." He never forgot that. Every rejection, every moment of doubt, he answered with silence and excellence. Over time, that silence became armor. This morning, the flight to Harbor City wasn't just another business trip, it was a turning point. Darius was about to meet the investment board of Kingsbridge Capital London, a multi-billion-dollar fund where a single handshake could reshape an entire industry. If the deal succeeded, Quantum Sage would receive a $300 million investment to expand its global medical AI platform technology capable of detecting early-stage lung cancer through voice data. To him, this wasn't about money. It was proof that a black man from Newark could shape the future of medicine. His assistant, Lena Brooks, meticulous and unshakable, had confirmed every detail 3 times with Aurora Atlantic Airways first-class seat, 1A, VIP service, priority boarding, low-sodium meal, no mistakes possible. "Darius," she said over the phone, "I checked the internal system. You're confirmed for seat 1A. He smiled. "I trust you." "Lena, as long as the flight's smooth, I'll finish the last slide." Neither of them knew that. Hours later, that very seat would become the eye of a storm. 7:10 a.m. Darius left the penthouse. Outside, the driver held the door open. Crownport stirred awake glass towers flashing gold in the morning light. Streams of commuters flowing toward the international airport. He leaned back in the seat, gazing out the window as the city blurred past. The streets rolled behind him, the same streets where a small, creaky wooden house once stood. The place he'd shared with his father. "I left that place long ago," he thought. "But that place never left me." Crownport International Airport, where everything began. The moment Darius entered the VIP check-in zone, he felt it a faint shift in the air, something only those who've lived it could detect. The woman at the counter glanced at him, then glanced past him, toward a white couple in line behind. "I'm sorry, sir, are you flying first class?" The words were light, polite even, but carried the weight of something heavier. He smiled, handing her his ticket. "Yes, seat 1A. She nodded, though her eyes paused just for half a second. That half-second pause, if slowed down, was the exact moment most people never realize they've revealed their bias. At security, the guard asked him to open his bag and remove his laptop. Ahead of him, 3 white men passed through untouched. He didn't react. He complied. And in his mind, a familiar voice echoed, his father's again. "When they inspect you harder, let them see you've got nothing to hide." In the first-class lounge, Darius chose a quiet corner and reopened his slides. A server approached, eyes scanning him with brief suspicion before turning courteous. "Sorry, sir, may I see your boarding pass again?" He smiled. "Of course." She checked it, nodded, and walked off. He went back to editing, but the thought lingered. "Why do I always have to be verified twice I know?" he murmured to himself. "If I say one wrong word, they'll use it against me." That thin, cold inner voice, honest but weary, flashed by and vanished. Around 8:50, Boarding was announced. Darius stood, straightened his tie. People passed him by, a few glancing his way, not because he was famous, but because a black man in a tailored bespoke suit, boarding first class, still drew surprise. When the attendant scanned his ticket, the system chimed Priority, 1A. She looked up, startled for a moment, then forced a polite smile. "Have a pleasant flight, Mr. Cole." He nodded, unaware that within hours the name Mr. Cole would be trending worldwide not because of his presentation, but because of a humiliation no one saw coming. As he stepped into the first-class cabin, Darius felt validated in choosing the early flight soft lighting, calm atmosphere, a hot cup of coffee waiting. He stowed his laptop, opened it, and reviewed the section titled Social Responsibility. It was about ethics in medical AI. Ironically, in just a few minutes, he would become the living test of those ethics. From a distance, the scene was perfection. A confident black man, sharp and composed, on the verge of sealing a world-changing deal. No one saw the years behind that image, the double shifts at MIT to keep his scholarship. The nights he slept in the lab washing glass beakers instead of drinking with classmates. He didn't need anyone to see. He just needed a quiet flight, one calm morning, in a world that was supposed to be fairer by now. But fairness, like an airplane, only needs the slightest deviation to go off course. And just hours later, when he was asked to leave seat 1A for a white passenger, his composure would be tested in fire. No one knew that earlier that morning. As he stood before the mirror, he had whispered to himself, "Don't get angry. Darius, today, you fly for something bigger than yourself." Morning at Crownport International Airport always felt like a living machine, white lights, metallic announcements, and people moving in endless, data-like streams. Darius Cole stood in the premium check-in line, passport and e-ticket in hand. His gray suit fit perfectly. His Italian shoes shone so bright they reflected the floor beneath him. The woman at the counter glanced up at him and paused for exactly half a second. It was such a tiny hesitation, almost invisible. But Darius caught it. It wasn't surprise, it was subconscious doubt, the kind that hides deep in how people categorize one another. "Good morning, sir. Are you flying first class?" The question sounded normal, but in context, it wasn't confirmation, it was verification. Darius smiled, handed her his phone. "Yes, 1A. She typed a few keys, then nodded. "Yes, that's correct." And he checked luggage. "No, just carry on." "Excellent. Have a pleasant flight." As Darius wheeled his bag away, he heard one of the agents whisper to another, "He looks like someone famous." He didn't turn around. Some sentences don't need to finish for you to know what they really mean. Security was always where patience got tested. In front of him, 3 white men in suits walked through the scanners without anyone asking to open their bags. They laughed, chatted, and moved on as if the world itself had cleared the way. When Darius stepped forward, the security officer, a middle-aged man with a southern accent, eyed his ticket, then him. "Sir, can you open your laptop bag? The laptop's already out. I need a closer look. New policy." Darius didn't argue. He opened the bag, handed over the laptop. The officer examined the serial label like he was inspecting contraband, then waved him through. It only took a minute, but that minute wasn't part of the process. It was part of the habit of suspicion. As he placed his things back in the tray, another agent passing by squinted at him. "So, what line of work are you in medical technology?" Darius replied calmly, Oh, tech. Huh, I figured artist or something. The man smirked. Darius smiled faintly, said nothing, and in his mind, a voice returned. His father's, from East Bridge, Newark. Years ago, you gotta be twice as good, just to get halfway there. He never forgot that, and he was still walking that same road where they double-check you, even when the only thing you're carrying is your own ability. The Aurora Atlantic first-class lounge shimmered in soft amber light and wood-scented air. At the reception desk, a middle-aged woman with a professional smile greeted him. When Darius approached, her eyes flicked to the absence of any airline uniform, then down to his ticket. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll need to see your ID to confirm access." He handed her his ID and boarding pass. She typed, checked, and finally said, "Thank you, sir. You may enter." Perfectly polite, but just behind him, a middle-aged white man walked up. She scanned his ticket no ID check, one tiny motion, but enough to make the inner fairness meter in Darius twitch. Not the first time. Definitely not the last. He chose a seat near the window, on the table lemon water, a financial paper, a glossy travel magazine. The PA announced boarding for other flights. Everything seemed normal except for that thin, lingering film of unease, quiet as dust. He opened his laptop and adjusted the slide titled Vision and Purpose. The line read, "Healthcare should see every life equally." The power of that sentence came from someone who'd spent his life not being fully seen. "I've grown used to being looked at, without ever being seen," he thought. It wasn't bitterness, it was memory. A young barista approached with a cup of espresso. "Excuse me, sir, would you like sugar?" "No, thank you." She nodded, turned to leave, then hesitated. "What field do you work in?" "Sir, I saw all those 3D models on your screen. Medical AI. Oh, like robots taking care of patients?" "Not exactly," he said softly. "We teach machines how to care." She paused, then smiled. Embarrassed. "That sounds beautiful." He nodded. Beautiful. If humans are willing to relearn it from the machines. She didn't fully understand, but he meant every word. Because sometimes, he thought, you have to teach compassion even to the people you're paying for service. By 9 the boarding call echoed again. Darius closed his laptop, stood. Light from the tall glass wall washed across his face, a calmness refined through years of walking spaces where every glance felt like a test. On his way to the gate, an airline attendant stopped him. "Excuse me, sir, first class." "Yes." She checked his ticket, smiled. "Have a good flight." He nodded once. No anger this time, just a quiet fatigue, the kind that comes from passing through layer after layer of invisible doors, each one asking, "Are you sure you belong here?" The scanner beeped. On the screen, the words flashed, "Priority. 1A, Darius Cole." The gate agent looked from the screen to his face-professional smile, but her eyes carried that same blend of surprise and confusion. I know that look, Darius thought. I saw it in high school when I won the MIT scholarship, in boardrooms, when I spoke before hundreds of white investors. Anywhere people aren't used to seeing someone like me in that seat. He stepped into first class without looking back. Seat 1A waited, spotless, serene, and no one imagined that, in just minutes, it would become the epicenter of a global moral crisis. But, at that moment, Darius knew only this: he had passed through every small act of bias quietly, without anger, without complaint, because he understood If I lose my temper, they win. But if I stay calm, justice will find its way. Be twice as good just to get halfway. Today, he didn't want to prove anything. He just wanted to fly and finish his work. But sometimes, the very day you expect peace is the day the world forces you to remind it that you still exist. The cabin door slid open with that familiar ding. The air was a blend of expensive cologne, leather seats, and the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Flight AA 1857 of Aurora Atlantic Airways, from Crownport to Harbor City, a calm 2.5-hour journey. Or so it seemed. Darius Cole boarded first. He nodded to the attendant, his voice low, steady. "Good morning." The attendant smiled a professional smile, not warm, not cold, just protocol. He found the seat 1A, the coveted window corner, that small island of stillness people pay thousands of dollars for, just to exist undisturbed. He placed his leather bag in the overhead bin, sat down, fastened his belt. The screen in front of him blinked to life, reflecting his face, calm, composed, the look of a man who had learned how to live under scrutiny. He opened his tablet. The title still glowed at the top of the presentation, Kingsbridge Capital. Final round, those words cold font. High stakes held half his life's work inside them. Sunlight poured through the oval window, painting silver across his charcoal tie. Then a voice came from the aisle. "Excuse me, you're sitting in my seat." Darius looked up. Standing before him was a white man, early 40s, pale gray suit, collar slightly creased from a rushed morning. His expression carried the easy confidence of someone used to being right. "I think there's been a mistake," Darius said evenly, holding up his boarding pass. He pointed to the bold print Seat 1A, first class. The man frowned and pulled out his own ticket. It also read 1A. The air seemed to tauten as if someone had just turned the background noise off. Heads began to turn in first class. Curiosity, judgment, impatience. The man gave a half smile. "I fly this route every week. This seat's always mine." He pressed on mine like it was a title, not a pronoun. Darius said nothing. He simply held out both tickets as the flight attendant approached. Chloe Sanders, blonde hair pinned tight, thin smile, eyes that never lingered on Darius for more than 3 seconds. "What seems to be the problem?" she asked, turning instinctively toward the white passenger. "This gentleman's in my seat," the man, Bradley Carter, replied. 1A? Chloe nodded a reflex. "Let's see, Mr. Carter." She glanced at his ticket, confirmed it with a quick nod. When Darius handed her his, she barely looked at it, didn't scan it, didn't check the system. "Looks like a mix-up," she said lightly. "I'll get this sorted." That phrase, "I'll get this sorted," sounded polite, but really meant, "Please move." "My ticket says 1A as well," Darius replied calmly. "You can verify it in the system." Chloe's smile thinned further. "We'll check it later, sir, but for now. So we don't delay takeoff. Could you move to another seat?" A few passengers exhaled, relieved someone else was being difficult. A few eyes rolled, a few sighed. Darius took a slow breath. "I'm already in my assigned seat." Chloe turned, called out Lauren. "Can you come here a second?" From the back of the cabin, Lauren Mitchell, the head flight attendant, appeared mid-30s, composed, hair in a bun, pace brisk and authoritative. "What's going on?" Chloe explained briefly, and not exactly neutrally. Lauren nodded once. "Sir," she said, her tone controlled but dismissive, "you may be in the wrong seat. We can find you a comparable one." "There's no mistake," Darius answered, voice firm but calm. "Please check the system. My ticket is for 1A. Group 1 confirmed 3 times." Lauren's jaw tensed. Her next words were soft, but edged. "Sir, I need your cooperation. Otherwise, I'll have to call the captain." Silence fell like glass. A cough. The sound of a magazine page turning. Eyes flicked between them, sharp as pins in the quiet air. "I've seen this before," Darius thought. That same look in Silicon Valley boardrooms when I walked in as the only black CEO in the room. He met Lauren's gaze. "You can call the captain," he said quietly. "I'll remain seated until there's proof." Lauren picked up her radio. "Captain Ellison, we need assistance in first class." Moments later, Captain Robert Ellison emerged, silver hair, captain's bars on his shoulders, authority in his stride. He scanned the cabin, eyes landing straight on Darius as if the story had already been told. "Sir," he said briskly. What seems to be the problem, Lauren cut in before Darius could respond. "This passenger is in the wrong seat and refusing to move." Ellison nodded once. "Automatic." "Sir, we need to depart on time. If you won't cooperate, I'll have to ask you to leave the aircraft." The words were precise, emotionless, a weapon wrapped in protocol. Darius lifted his phone, screen glowing with the open e-ticket. "I don't want to delay the flight," he said evenly, "but this is my ticket, 1A. I just want to be treated fairly." Ellison didn't even glance at the screen. "We'll handle it later. For now, please change seats." Something cracked in the silence, not from volume, but from how forcibly calm it had all become. Darius drew in a breath. He knew. This wasn't a battle to win with words. If I argue, they'll call me disruptive. If I comply, they'll think they were right. But sometimes, silence is a statement. He nodded slowly. "All right." Lauren exhaled with relief. Chloe smiled the small, satisfied kind. Bradley Carter murmured a polite thank you and took seat 1A, folding his newspaper like the scene had never happened. Darius followed an attendant down the aisle. They stopped at row 34, the middle seat, between a large man and a college kid with headphones. "You can sit here for now, sir. We'll refund you after the flight." He nodded, said nothing, sat down, then quietly slipped his phone into video record mode inside his jacket pocket, not for revenge, for truth. Behind him, someone whispered, laughing softly, "Don't know why they think they belong in first class?" He heard it clearly and simply closed his eyes. "I don't need them to believe I belong here. I just need them to see the world watching them." Up front, Bradley Carter ordered coffee. In row 34, Darius reopened his presentation. The words still glowed against the dim light of Coach Justice doesn't need to be loud. First class went silent. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind, like someone had just pulled the air out of the room. Lauren Mitchell, the lead flight attendant, stood straight, wearing that stiff, diplomatic smile. "Sir, we can find you another seat," Darius Cole answered, voice perfectly level, not an inch higher. "I just want to sit in the seat I paid for." "Yes," Lauren said, a hint of unease in her tone. "But we need to depart on time. You know how the rules are." From the cockpit, Captain Robert Ellison stepped out, uniform crisp, voice of a man used to being obeyed. "What seems to be the issue here?" Lauren explained briefly. But the way she told it shifted the weight of the story. Not a passenger was denied his seat, but a passenger was being difficult. Ellison nodded. "Sir, he said to Darius. "We don't want to inconvenience you, but if you stay here, we'll have to delay departure. I'm asking for your cooperation." That word cooperation landed like an order, not an invitation, an expectation. Darius looked up, his expression unchanged. "Captain, I'm in the seat printed on my ticket. If your attendant checks the system, she'll see Ellison cut him off. Mr. Cole, I understand, but we can't hold up an entire flight over a minor mix-up. Minor mix-up. To him, it was procedure. To Darius, it was a mirror showing a structure where minor means not worth fixing for someone like you." I know this game, Darius thought. This is the no-win setup. If I argue, I'm the problem. If I stay quiet, they act like I agreed. He looked around. 12 pairs of eyes in first class were on him, not hateful, not sympathetic, just bothered. The look people have when inconvenience walks into their comfort. A man in the row 2 pulled out his phone not to film, just to check the time. Because justice rarely starts when people are afraid of losing punctuality. "All right," Darius said. His voice was so calm it made Lauren pause for half a second. "You can put me in another seat. I won't make the flight late because of me." Lauren nodded quickly, like someone who had just disarmed a bomb. "Thank you, Mr. Cole. We really appreciate your cooperation." From the side, Bradley Carter gave a small smile, not mocking, not apologetic, the smile of someone watching the old order fall right back into place. Darius picked up his bag. His dress shoes clicked softly against the floor, a small sound, but it carried. He walked down the aisle of first class between 2 rows of curated comfort, filtered air, soft light, ceramic cups, quiet voices, a cabin designed for people who never get asked to move. Behind him, a young flight attendant whispered to another, thinking he couldn't hear, "I just don't get why they always think they belong in first class." He didn't stop, just pressed his lips together. "I heard it. I always hear it. But if I turn round, they'll say, 'See.' They always overreact." Lauren led him farther back. No seats left in business. "We have a temporary seat in row 34, she said. "You can sit there while we get this sorted. Get this sorted, nice words for sit down, and don't make noise." "All right," he said. As they walked through economy, a few passengers looked up, then right back down at their phones. He felt like he was walking a hallway of invisibility seen, but not really seen. Row 34B, middle seat, cramped, wedged between 2 worlds. To the left, a big man already opening a snack. To the right, a college kid with headphones on, foot bouncing to the beat. Darius sat down, set his bag on his lap, tried to make his shoulders smaller to fit the frame of the seat. The space smelled of plastic, recirculated air, and real life. Far from the leather silence of 1A, a different attendant, not Lauren, not Chloe, bent down, tone flat. "If you want a refund, you can call customer service after we land. Right now, we need you seated so we can take off." "Thank you," he said, voice colorless. The engines began to spool up. The plane pushed back. The cabin lights dimmed. Darius took out his phone, opened the camera, and started recording, slipped it back into his suit pocket. Not to go viral, to document, because some things, if not recorded, the world will call a misunderstanding. When the plane reached cruising altitude, he tilted his head back, resting it lightly. Economy sounded different kids crying, trays clattering, the hum of too many bodies in too small a space. If it were me, maybe I would have felt humiliated. But Darius didn't. What he felt was empty, not defeated, just done. This isn't the first time they've taken my seat, but maybe this will be the last time they do it, and still think no one saw. Behind him, 2 flight attendants whispered, thinking the noise would cover them. That was kind of funny. Though, some people just think they're first class. Yeah, probably some self-made CEO or whatever. Soft laughter, thin, brittle. Darius turned his head slightly. His eyes were cold, not angry, just archiving. He didn't record them. He didn't have to. Some sentences convict the speaker all by themselves. The plane sliced through clouds on his tablet. The presentation was still open. Healthcare equality through intelligent empathy. A line he wrote in the middle of the night, thinking about fairness in medicine. Now, it sounded like irony. He let out a quiet smile, not sure if it was from bitterness or from being too used to it. Maybe fairness, he thought, is just like this plane. It only takes off when somebody gives up their seat. Next to him, the kid with the headphones looked up and grinned. They moved you. Yeah, Darius said. Small mix-up. Man, if that was me, I would have gone off. Darius chuckled softly. Sometimes being quiet is louder than yelling. The kid didn't fully get it. He just laughed awkwardly. But the big guy on the left, he heard it, and his eyes changed just a little. When the drink cart rolled by, Darius asked for water. The attendant handed it to him without looking. A bit spilled, splashing on his sleeve. Sorry, she said, not really sounding sorry. He wiped it off, set the cup down on the tray. Outside the small oval window, the sky opened cold, blue, endless. From up here, no one could tell who was in first class and who was in row 34. Just people. Just lives. They can push me to row 34, but they don't realize the real 1A is in how I choose to keep my dignity. The plane had leveled off at 32,000 feet. The seatbelt sign dimmed, leaving the cabin bathed in that soft, bluish morning glow. The hum of the engines was steady, like the heartbeat of a giant machine keeping everything moving on schedule. In row 34B, Darius Cole sat upright, shoulders square, eyes fixed on the tiny screen ahead. The cramped seat pressed him between a heavy-set man and a student with earbuds, but Darius didn't care about the discomfort. He was watching. An airplane is a world in miniature, a place where people reveal who they really are within a few square feet. And today, that world was making its own movie, without realizing it was being filmed. A few rows ahead and to the right sat a young woman, mid-20s, light-skinned, soft brown hair, crisp white blouse, Madison Clark. She worked for Aurora Atlantic Airways, headquarters in Westport Bay, not a flight attendant, but an analyst in corporate compliance. When Darius was asked to leave first class, Madison had witnessed everything. She saw how Chloe Sanders barely glanced at his ticket before assuming he was wrong. She saw Lauren Mitchell nod at the captain without checking the system. And she saw the looks on the faces around them, the kind of look her own father, a retired black veteran, had faced for years, and answered with silence. Madison hadn't planned to be on this flight. She'd been reassigned at the last minute, flying from Crownport to Harbor City for an internal meeting, ironically, about new ethics and diversity training for frontline staff. But here she was, watching the company's unspoken policies play out in real time. When Darius was moved to row 34, Madison couldn't look away. She noticed the way he folded his suit jacket with care, the way he reopened his tablet and continued reviewing slides, posture still precise, composed like he was still sitting in a boardroom instead of being demoted to coach. No grimace, no protest. That silence, she thought, was louder than any outburst. How could a man like that be treated like this? The question looped in her mind, buried under the drone of the cabin. Behind her, two attendants whispered, "That was exhausting. Some people just always think they're right." "Yeah. Hope the airline doesn't get sued for it." Madison tilted her head slightly, listening. Then quietly opened her phone, slipped it behind a magazine, and pressed record. She didn't film faces, only voices. The sound of truth was enough. When she looked up again, Darius's eyes met hers. Not suspicious, not questioning, just understanding. Two strangers. But in that instant, they both knew what they'd seen couldn't stay buried. When the cabin settled, Madison tore a napkin from her bag, with neat, small handwriting. She wrote, "I recorded what they said. I work for Aurora Atlantic Corporate. This isn't right." She folded it once. When she stood up to go to the restroom, she paused beside row 34, adjusting his tray table like a passerby, straightening it, and let the napkin drop softly into his lap. Then she kept walking, never looked back. Darius glanced down. A small, folded napkin. The handwriting fine and deliberate, but it cracked the layer of frost that had been tightening around him. He opened it, read the words, and folded it again. His face didn't change, but somewhere inside, a quiet gear began to turn. "I'm not alone," he thought. Someone else saw. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, a soft tremor that shook the coffee cups and seat backs. No one noticed that somewhere between rows 20 and 34, two people who'd never met had just built the first bridge toward justice out of paper and courage. Madison returned to her seat. She didn't look back. She opened her laptop, pretending to work while she quietly uploaded the audio file to the company's secure cloud. In Darius's pocket, the phone was still recording. He didn't know who the woman was or why she'd done it. But he knew this much: justice always begins in unexpected places from people without power, but with conscience. The man beside him slept. The student on his right had taken off his headphones, glancing curiously at him. Darius offered a small, reassuring smile. "It's okay," that smile said. The student nodded, awkwardly. If it were me, maybe I'd have felt relief, but Darius didn't. Instead, he thought, what will she face when this plane lands? He'd lived long enough to know, in every system, the first person who speaks truth is the first to get hurt. And right now, the man with the power to protect her was stuck in row 34, powerless in his own composure. An hour later, the fastened seatbelt sign came on again. The pilot's voice echoed they were beginning their descent into Harbor City. Passengers adjusted seats, gathered bags, buckled up. Darius turned slightly, searching for her. Madison was still there, eyes on the window, the reflection of the ocean shimmering across her face. She didn't look back, but when the sunlight caught her laptop, he saw another napkin, half tucked beneath it. The handwriting was the same. "I'll do my part. You just stay silent." As the wheels screeched against the runway, the sound stretched long and raw. No one knew that in that moment. Two phoneshers and Huz held the entire chain of injustice that Aurora Atlantic would soon try to hide. Some would call it evidence. For Darius, it was simply truth, seen at the right time. The captain's voice came through. "We wish you a pleasant day." No one realized that for two people on this flight. That day would never be pleasant again. Darius stood, adjusted his jacket. Madison remained seated. As he walked past her, she gave the faintest nod. Small, it could have been a coincidence, but he knew. She had just given him what the entire system lacked: a witness with a conscience. Justice doesn't walk to you, he thought. But sometimes it sends a signal, a napkin, a glance, a person brave enough to whisper, "I saw it." 3 hours in the air, the longest stretch of silence a man can sit through when all he has left is truth. Especially when that truth began in row 1A and ended with him being pushed back to row 34. Darius Cole didn't sleep. His eyes were closed, head leaning slightly against the seat, but his mind was sharp, replaying every second, every word, every glance. He was memorizing so he would never forget. The phone in his pocket was still recording, from Chloe's dismissive tone to Captain Ellison's cold command to the quiet, mocking laughter from the rear cabin. All of it now belonged to him. Fragments of a larger system, finally caught on tape. Hours passed, the cabin lights dimmed to a gentle blue. Most passengers slept. Only the hum of the engines and the soft clink of a plastic spoon stirred the air. In row 33, Madison Clark turned her head slightly, just enough for Darius to catch her eye. A brief glance, no longer than a breath, but he understood it was time. He waited until the flight attendant moved past, then unbuckled his belt and stood. Every step toward the back of the plane was quiet. Controlled the stride of a man who'd decided that silence was now strategy. Near the galley, beside the metal coffee carts, Madison was pretending to look through her bag. When Darius stopped beside her, she spoke under her breath so soft it barely existed between the engine noise. "You came at the right time," she whispered. "I just finished checking." Darius didn't reply, only tilted his head slightly. She pulled a business card from her jacket. On the back, written in pen, AA internal app, verified 1A, Ha Cole, 1B, Ha Carter. Madison looked around once, then said clearly, each word deliberate, "You were the only passenger assigned to 1A. I checked the manifest myself. They never verified it. They just assumed." Darius studied her face. He didn't ask how she accessed the data. He already knew only an insider could. "Thank you," he said quietly. "But why help me?" There was no suspicion in his voice, only the question of a man too familiar with apathy. Madison hesitated, then said, "My father's black, my mother's white. He told me once how he was removed from a flight in 1999 because they didn't believe he was supposed to be in business class. I grew up remembering that story." She looked up, eyes steady. "When I saw them do it to you, I knew I couldn't stay silent. The galley light was harsh, cold. It split their faces in two halves, one man stripped of dignity, one woman risking hers to restore it. You know, if they find out, you could lose your job," Darius said. Madison gave a faint smile, the kind of smile only people ready to face consequences can give. "I know, but some things are worth losing, more than pretending not to see." He nodded slowly. For a moment, they just stood there, two strangers bound by principle, not circumstance. Different colors, different worlds, but the same understanding: real justice doesn't shout. She handed him another paper, a printed passenger manifest. Seat 1A Cole. Darius, verified boarding seat 1B Carter. Bradley, checked in, late. She pointed to the second line. They never verify when it's irregular. Carter's platinum. The system automatically upgrades him if he checks in after a certain time. All it takes is him being a few minutes late, and the seat shifts, no human review. Darius stared at the black and white text. It was so simple. A minor system error, a habit of trust for some, and just like that, a tiny algorithm turned fairness into bias. "Can you confirm this again after we land?" he asked. Madison nodded. "I already saved the screen logs, and I recorded Chloe and Lauren talking in the galley. I'll send them to you once we're on the ground." He folded the business card, tucked it into his jacket. "Protect yourself first. I'll handle the rest." She hesitated. "They'll say you're overreacting, that you're using your influence to make a scene." Darius gave a quiet laugh. "I don't need revenge. I just need the truth to sit where it belongs. If I were him, I might have trembled with anger, but Darius didn't. His calm wasn't weakness. It was armor forged from years of knowing rage only gives power to the wrong people. He didn't need to fight back. He just needed to document. Madison checked her watch. "We should get back. They'll notice if we're gone too long." He nodded. Before she left, she asked softly, "What are you going to do with all this I don't know yet?" He said, "But I won't let it disappear." They walked in opposite directions, two passengers who had never met, connected by one moment between clouds, a moment powerful enough to change the entire narrative. Back in row 34, Darius sat down and fastened his belt. The student next to him leaned over. "Who were you talking to?" "Someone on the flight. You know her?" No." Darius smiled faintly. "But I probably owe her more than a thank you." He opened his tablet and typed a short list. 1. Manifest confirms 1A, Darius Cole. Though, Carter, 1B. 3. Chloe, Lauren, no ticket check. 4. Madison Clark, witness. 5. No action until landing. Every word was a puzzle piece, a map for the counterstrike. He wasn't going to yell. He wasn't going to sue yet. He would let the system collapse under the weight of its own data. Outside, the plane glided across the clouds. In first class, Bradley Carter slept soundly, magazine slipping from his hand. And back in row 34, Darius watched sunlight pierce through the white haze, a soft, distant gold. Justice doesn't need speed, he thought. It just needs altitude, enough to see the whole picture. And for the first time since being forced from his seat, Darius Cole smiled, because now the game had just changed. Aurora Atlantic Flight, AA 1857, began its descent, slicing through layers of thick cloud. Below, Harbor City shimmered skyscrapers gleaming silver beneath the late afternoon sun. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but oddly deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a technical matter, please remain seated when the aircraft comes to a full stop. Thank you for your cooperation." A technical matter. But Darius Cole knew there was no malfunction in the sky. The only failure today had happened on the ground hours ago, when he'd been stripped of his own seat. 1A. The wheels screeched against the runway, a long, metallic cry that felt like justice stretching its limbs. The cabin shuddered slightly. Passengers glanced toward the front, waiting for the familiar "you may now stand." But the doors stayed sealed. No one moved. Then Lauren Mitchell, the lead flight attendant, stepped into the aisle, clutching her radio. "Please remain seated. Airline staff will be boarding shortly." She tried to smile. Her voice trembled. 2 minutes later, the door hissed open. 2 men in black suits stepped aboard, followed by a small woman in a navy blazer, calm and composed, eyes sharp as glass. Valerie Chen, Vice President of Operations, Aurora Atlantic Airways. The atmosphere changed instantly. Every breath in the cabin seemed to freeze. A few passengers exchanged glances, some uneasy, others expectant. They thought they knew this scene the black man who caused trouble, finally about to be escorted out. Lauren started to speak, but Valerie lifted a hand quieting her before a word could leave her mouth. Her gaze swept across the cabin, then locked on the very front row. And then, to everyone's shock, she walked straight to seat 1A. Bradley Carter looked up, half a smile still on his lips. "Mr. Carter," Valerie said, her tone cool, surgical. "Please gather your belongings and come with us. There's a matter that needs clarification." Bradley blinked. There must be a mistake. "You've got the wrong no, sir," she interrupted softly. "There's no mistake." She turned to security, escort Mr. Carter off the plane. The cabin fell completely still. The only sound was the muted drag of a suitcase rolling along the floor as Bradley rose, scanning the cabin for a sympathetic face, but found none. From row 34, Darius watched. He didn't smile. He didn't move. He simply observed as if watching justice walk down the aisle wearing someone else's shoes. At the front, Lauren Mitchell went pale. She stepped forward, voice quivering. "Chen, there must be a misunderstanding." This passenger Valerie's reply was measured but carried like thunder. "There's no misunderstanding. Lauren, seat 1A belongs to Mr. Darius Cole. The system verified it. You failed to check." Lauren froze. Behind her, Chloe Sanders shrank half a step back, face drained of color. From the business cabin, Madison Clark stood up. Her voice rang clear across the silent steady. Unwavering, "I'm Madison Clark from Aurora Atlantic Corporate Compliance. I recorded the entire incident. The crew forced Mr. Cole from seat 1A without verifying his ticket. His boarding pass was legitimate." Every eye turned toward her. No one breathed. Even Valerie paused, then nodded. "Thank you. Madison, please take your seat." She turned again, this time toward the back of the plane. Mr. Cole Darius nodded once. "Yes. Would you come with me? Please, we have matters to discuss." And, her tone softened, "on behalf of the airline, I owe you an apology." The sentence was simple, unembellished, but it hit the cabin like a pin dropping in a church. No one spoke, because everyone understood the man they'd silently judged an hour ago was now being addressed as Mr. Cole. Darius rose slowly. A few passengers averted their eyes. A woman in row 3 murmured, barely audible, I'm sorry for not saying anything earlier." He gave her a small nod. No anger, no forgiveness, just acknowledgement person to person. As he walked forward, the same aisle that had once felt narrow now parted around him. The quiet wasn't oppressive anymore. It was reverent. At the door, Valerie Chen opened the overhead bin herself. Inside, she retrieved a black leather bag, the one Chloe had moved for convenience. She handed it to him with both hands. "Yours, Mr. Cole." He accepted it calmly. "Thank you. I know an apology isn't enough," Valerie said quietly, "but I promise this won't be buried." Darius met her gaze. "Promises aren't necessary," he said. "What matters is the truth." She nodded once, then to the security team. "Document everything. Pull the cabin video." Behind them, Madison rose again. As Darius passed, she said softly, "I sent the files to you." He didn't turn his head. "I know. Thank you, Madison." And that was all. As he stepped into the jet bridge, sunlight streamed through the glass, painting his face in gold and shadow. Behind him, whispers rippled through the cabin. "So he's the CEO, Fortune 500. Quantum Sage. Right God, that was him." The murmurs faded into the white noise of airport announcements. When Darius's shoes touched the ground of Harbor City International, he stopped for a moment. Not because he was tired, but because he understood this silence was the verdict. He hadn't argued. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't sought revenge. He'd simply let the truth stand up and watched as those who once thought they held power realized, slowly and painfully, that they'd already lost it. Sometimes, he thought, justice doesn't arrive with a gavel. It arrives in that quiet moment, when people realize they've just lost their own respect. The cabin door opened, and a blast of cold airport air swept in, carrying the metallic tang of jet fuel and the faint echo of departure announcements. Everything looked ordinary, except for the 100 silent eyes still following the black man who'd just been escorted off the plane, Darius Cole. He walked slowly, each step deliberate, never looking back. Behind him, Valerie Chen, Vice President of Operations for Aurora Atlantic, kept pace beside him. Phone pressed to her ear, whispering into security. Her expression wasn't just tense, it was the look of someone standing on the thin edge between justice and PR disaster. At the end of the jet bridge, an airline staffer bowed slightly. "Ms. Chen, the VIP room is ready." Valerie turned to Darius, her voice softening. "Mr. Cole, please this way. The Aurora Executive Lounge is prepared. Our CEO will join us via video. We'd like to talk things through, quickly and quietly." "Quickly and quietly," Darius repeated, tasting the phrase as if it were something bitter. He met her gaze. "You know, Ms. Chen, everything I've seen in my life tends to begin with those two words, quickly and quietly." The air between them stilled. They entered the lounge, a polished sanctuary of coffee aroma and leather upholstery. The Aurora Atlantic logo rotated slowly on a mounted screen, its silver-blue light reflecting off glass and steel. Darius sat upright. Across from him, Valerie Chen, 2 legal officers and the HR director, a man with rimmed glasses and a nervous smile. A laptop was open, waiting for the CEO's face to appear on video. Valerie began carefully, "Mr. Cole, we want to express our deepest apologies. Aurora Atlantic does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. We are suspending the crew pending an internal review." "Stop there," Darius said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut like glass. He leaned forward. "Ms. Chen, I don't want this handled internally. I want it handled properly." She blinked, unsure. "I'm not sure I follow. What I mean," Darius continued, "is that justice isn't firing a few people to calm the noise. It's teaching a system to see a man without first guessing his color." The room went still. One of the legal officers looked down, pretending to take notes. Valerie's eyes flickered conflict and calculation dancing behind them. "I understand," she said softly, "but you must realize, if this becomes public, it could spiral. The company, the staff, many innocent people would be hurt. You don't want that, do you?" Darius gave a tired smile, not cruel, just weary. "You're right. I don't want anyone hurt. But tell me how many people have already been hurt because things like this stayed silent." He paused. His voice dropped lower, every word precise. "You want me to stay quiet, but I won't not because I need respect for myself. but because there are thousands who never got the chance to ask for theirs. If it were me, I might have raised my voice, but Darius didn't. He spoke with the calm authority of a man who'd won more battles through patience than fury. He reached into his bag, pulling out Madison's business card and a printed passenger manifest. "This is your internal manifest," he said, "from Aurora's own system. I have copies, including the login logs, timestamps, and user IDs." Valerie's composure cracked for a moment. "Where did you—" "Don't ask me that," he interrupted. "Ask why one of your employees had to risk her job to help me uncover the truth." The silence turned dense. Valerie tapped her fingers lightly on the table, then sighed. "What do you want, Mr. Cole?" Darius looked out the window at planes queuing up, silver wings gleaming under the sun. When he finally spoke, his tone was quiet but unshakable. "I want the full cabin video preserved untouched. I want the crew roster for Flight AA-1857. I want the employee IDs for Lauren Mitchell, Chloe Sanders, and Captain Robert Ellison. And I want a formal statement from Aurora Atlantic acknowledging passenger mishandling." He turned back to her. "Not to sue you, but to prove justice still has a place to stand." Valerie exhaled slowly. "I'll arrange that." "No," Darius corrected. "Not arrange, execute, now." His voice was steady, not raised, but carrying an authority that made the whole room stop breathing. He stood, straightened his jacket, and said, "You asked if I'm afraid of scandal. I've lived my life in a world where one wrong word could end everything. So no, Ms. Chen, I'm not afraid." Just then, his phone buzzed. The screen lit up. Lena Brooks. He answered on speaker. "Darius," came her calm, clear voice. "I just spoke to Kingsbridge Capital. They've moved tomorrow's board meeting. You've got an extra day. Oh, and that video from the flight. It's already spreading online. A perfect alignment of timing. The truth didn't wait for permission." He ended the call, met Valerie's eyes, and said quietly, "See, the truth always finds the light. Sometimes it doesn't even need me to flip the switch." He picked up his bag, turned, and walked toward the door. No one stopped him. No one spoke. The door closed behind him, leaving a heavy silence, the kind that doesn't come from fear, but from realization. Because in that moment, everyone in that room saw what Darius had seen long ago. The system they'd built to protect themselves had just exposed them. People often say silence is weakness, but there are kinds of silence that make every room look inward. And that day, Darius Cole chose precisely that kind of silence not to soothe, but to awaken. Late afternoon in Harbor City. The sun stretched long across wet asphalt, painting streaks of gold between the lines of westbound traffic. A black Mercedes slipped through it all, Darius Cole in the back seat, leaving the airport behind. Billboards of Aurora Atlantic Airways lined the highway, their slogan catching the light above all. "We care." A slogan that now sounded like a punchline. Darius sat still, phone in hand, replaying the video in silence. The only sound in the car was the quiet rhythm of his finger tapping the screen, steady, deliberate, like a surgeon dissecting away every unnecessary detail until only truth remained. On the screen, the sequence was simple and surgical. Lauren Mitchell, leaning forward, voice clipped. "Sir, you're in the wrong seat." Chloe Sanders, avoiding eye contact, turning to the white passenger. "So sorry for the inconvenience. Mr. Carter." Then Darius's calm reply, "I believe there's been a mistake." And finally, Madison Clark's off-camera voice, "I confirm seat 1A belongs to Mr. Cole." 58 seconds, no music, no narration, just raw, unfiltered reality and the silence that follows when the truth doesn't need help speaking. Darius leaned back in his seat, murmuring to himself, "That's all it takes." He didn't want the video to become a witch hunt. He wanted it to be a mirror one that showed people what they already knew but never dared to face. He forwarded the file to Lena Brooks. Watching from Quantum Sage HQ, his message was as concise as ever: upload the original, neutral description. No hashtags, let the public name it themselves. Then he hit share. 10 minutes later, the clip went live on his personal account, 10 million followers and counting. The caption read only, "Dignity isn't taken from us. It's tested, no accusations, no calls for boycotts. But the internet doesn't wait for permission." Within 30 minutes, comment sections were flooding. "They really kicked a black CEO out of first class. I've flown Aurora. I've seen things like this happen. This isn't an error, it's a culture." Someone added a tag, "Boycott Aurora Atlantic." Within an hour, it was trending at number 3 nationwide. At Aurora Atlantic's headquarters in Westport Bay, the boardroom lights burned late, stock charts glowed crimson, numbers plunged 5%, then 9%, then 12%. The customer hotline crashed. Email servers jammed with complaints before midnight. Valerie Chen stood by the window, gripping her phone. "He posted it," she said hoarsely. A young PR officer spoke up from the corner, voice taut with fear. "And not just him. Ma'am, Herald Tribune and Atlantic Journal want statements. They're calling him the moral face of modern AI healthcare." Valerie said nothing. She didn't need to. She knew when justice speaks quietly, it's far louder than outrage. Back in the car, Darius's phone rang. Madison's voice trembled on the other end. "You're sure about this?" "You just shook my entire company." "Not me," Darius said calmly, eyes still on the screen. "The truth just found its way out." There was silence. Then Madison whispered, "If they find out I gave you the data, I'll lose my job." "You're not alone," Darius said. "And if they do, the world will know your name." An hour later, she did something no one expected. A new video appeared, Madison Clark. Face uncovered, sitting in a small yellow-lit office. Her voice was steady, every word deliberate. "My name is Madison Clark. I work for Aurora Atlantic. I confirm that Mr. Darius Cole was the rightful passenger for seat 1A. The crew never checked his ticket. I witnessed it myself." The clip ignited like fire meeting dry wind. News outlets picked up the story, dubbing it the Flight 1857 incident. Social media simplified it further. The 1A story. Within 12 hours, the narrative had escaped everyone's control. Morning news shows interviewed passengers from the flight. "I was there. They never even looked at his ticket, just told him to move." An elderly white woman broke down on live television. "I wanted to say something, but I was scared they'd throw me off too. I'm ashamed." Each testimony cracked another piece off the airline's polished image. That night, Darius stood by the hotel window in Westport Bay. Below, the street pulsed with camera flashes and reporters. He didn't speak to anyone. He didn't post again. He just sent one final message to Lena Brooks before shutting off his phone. "We don't need to shout. Just let them hear themselves. I used to think justice only arrived with slogans and megaphones. But that night, Darius proved the opposite. Sometimes it takes just one video, one calm voice, and one man who refuses to lose his composure to shake an empire. The next morning, Bloomberg led with the headline, "Aurora Atlantic shares plunge 17% at market open." Politicians, activists, and celebrities began resharing the clip, calling for reform. A single tweet from a congresswoman went viral. "When justice gets bumped from first class, maybe it's time for society to relearn basic decency." And through it all, Darius Cole, the man at the center of the storm, stayed quiet. No press conferences, no victory lap. He knew the media's fire could consume as fast as it illuminated. "I'm not seeking revenge," he thought. "I just want people to check the ticket before they judge." That night, in the quiet of his hotel room, he opened one last email from Madison. "I don't know what tomorrow looks like," she wrote, "but I believe your silence is the reason people are finally listening." He read it twice, then turned off the light. Outside, the ocean wind brushed against the glass, soft, steady, like the breath of justice itself. Not loud, but enough to make a whole city tremble. The Aurora Atlantic Airways headquarters in Westport Bay rose like a monolith of glass, clear, gleaming, and cold. From afar, it looked transparent. Up close, it was impenetrable. Seagulls cut across the gray sky, their reflections flickering across the building's mirrored walls, fleeting, weightless, almost ghostly. That afternoon, no one inside was really working. Internal chat feeds were melting down. Stock is crashing. Press outside the gate. Cost boycott Aurora Atlantic still trending #1. On the 38th floor, the boardroom felt like it was holding its breath. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Gregory Shaw, CEO of Aurora Atlantic. Behind him, the company's silver logo gleamed like polished steel. Across from him stood Darius Cole, silent, still, composed. Gregory offered a smile, engineered to be warm but never vulnerable. "Mr. Cole," he began, his tone rehearsed. "I want to express my deepest regret for what happened. Aurora does not condone discrimination in any form. We're conducting a full internal review to identify the cause and ensure this never happens again." Darius didn't sit right away. He turned to look out the floor-to-ceiling window behind the CEO, the distant airport barely visible. Thin trails of smoke curling upward into the clouds. Then he spoke. An internal review. His tone wasn't mocking, merely level. "Is that what you do with everything you'd rather the world forget?" Gregory's smile didn't flinch, but his fingers tightened slightly on the armrest. "Not at all. I mean, we'd like to handle this privately, respectfully for both parties. I'm personally authorizing a lifetime first-class pass, plus a formal apology. And, if possible, we'd like you to stay quiet." The interruption landed softly, but hit the room like thunder. Darius pulled out the chair and sat, folding his hands. "You know, Mr. Shaw, I spent 20 years staying quiet to reach a place others were born into. I didn't come here for a card. I came to see if your company's capable of facing the truth." Gregory forced a chuckle, taking a sip of water to buy time. "Mr. Cole, we're both businessmen. You know this crisis is costing us hundreds of millions. If you want, we could turn this around together, a joint initiative. Perhaps Aurora could sponsor an equality campaign. You consult, we co-brand, everyone wins." "Right then." His phone started buzzing nonstop on the table. Two names flashed on the screen: Charlotte Pierce, board chair, and Daniel Foster, Horizon Equity, the airline's largest investor. Gregory's jaw tightened. He glanced at Darius, then at the phone. "Excuse me a moment." Darius leaned back. "Calm. Take it. They'll explain faster than I can." Gregory hesitated, then hit speaker. Charlotte's voice came sharp, metallic. "Gregory, we're watching the stock tickers, down 22% in 2 days. The media's circling. The board wants answers. What are you doing to fix this?" Before he could answer, Daniel Foster cut in, tone flat. "Lethal Horizon is reviewing its position. I just watched Cole's video. Let me be clear, if you don't present a concrete resolution today, we'll call an emergency board meeting." Gregory swallowed hard. We're handling it. I'm with Mr. Cole right now. Everything will be resolved appropriately." Darius watched him squirm, expression unchanged. If it were me, I might have felt vindicated, but Darius didn't gloat. He simply waited, silent as stone. When the call ended, he spoke quietly. "Mr. Shaw, here's what I want." He reached into his bag and slid a handwritten note across the table. Just a few lines, but each one surgical one. Immediate termination of Flight 1857 crew, Captain Robert Ellison, Lauren Mitchell, and Chloe Sanders. 2. Mandatory racial awareness and equality retraining for all flight staff. 3. Independent third-party audit on racial incidents, public disclosure of all passenger handling data for the past 24 months. 4. Establishment of the Air Travel Equality Initiative, a $50 million fund managed by an external trust. Gregory skimmed the paper, his brow tightening. "Mr. Cole, do you realize how large that number is? $50 million. We're an airline, not a charity." Darius met his gaze, voice even, eyes steady. "Not charity. A buyback. You're purchasing your company's honor, the one you just sold cheap." The room froze. The hum of the AC was suddenly deafening. Outside, wind hissed against the glass like metal grinding on metal. Darius rose slowly, straightening his jacket. "You don't have to sign today. They'll make you sign. I'm just giving you the chance to call it your decision." 10 minutes later, Gregory's phone buzzed again. A single message from Charlotte Pierce. "Do what's right." He stared at the words a long time. Then he exhaled. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll take it to the board. $50 million fund, independent audit, system-wide training. But one condition, you don't sue the airline." Darius nodded once. "I never said I would. I just don't want anyone else to live what I did." Gregory watched as Darius walked to the door. The glass closed behind him, reflecting the CEO's own face, a man once fluent in control. Now staring at the hollow space where certainty used to live. Outside, in the vast lobby, hundreds of Aurora employees stood gathered around news screens. As Darius passed, the noise fell to whispers. No one spoke, but some, for the first time, lowered their heads. "People only truly see you," he thought, "when they can no longer pretend they're standing above you." And, with that measured stride toward the exit, the clash between intellect and authority, dignity and privilege, finally had its victor, one who never had to raise his voice to win. 2 days after the meeting in Westport Bay, the Aurora Atlantic headquarters still hadn't slept. The 41st floor, the board of directors' conference room, glowed through the night like a glass furnace. Inside, the people who once ruled from leather chairs were now being forced to listen to the truths they'd spent years avoiding. On the massive screen, Madison Clark appeared via video call, the young employee who had quietly helped Darius Cole. Her voice was calm, steady, professional over the last 18 months. I've documented 27 internal complaints from passengers of color. Most were closed under insufficient evidence or crew acted within protocol. She clicked the next slide. Case reports filled the wall line after line, stamped resolved, no action taken. Silence thickened the air, heavy as smoke. At the head of the table, Charlotte Pierce, the board chair, sat perfectly upright, her eyes locked on the data. She was known for being icy, composed, but now her gaze softened, touched by something heavier than authority realization. "Ms. Clark," she said slowly, "were all these cases handled by the same department?" Madison nodded. "Yes, ma'am. The Passenger Behavior and Compliance Division. The department head was personally appointed by Mr. Gregory Shaw." Every head turned toward Gregory. He sat motionless, lips tight, fingers laced together, the kind of stillness that doesn't come from control, but from collapse. If it were me, I might have felt satisfaction. But Darius, sitting quietly in the back row, just observing, didn't need victory. He wanted them to hear the sound of their own system cracking. Madison continued. "Last year, while auditing training records, I found an internal email chain regarding diversity training proposals." She opened another file. On the screen, one line stood out, the subject, "Read Diversity Training Proposal." Sender, Gregory Shaw. The message contained only one sentence. "We're an airline, not a social justice organization. Passengers earn respect by behaving according to the class they pay for." The words hung in the air like a toxic fog. No one spoke. Even the soft hum of the air conditioner sounded like a mechanical heartbeat, cold, repetitive, humanless. Charlotte closed her eyes briefly, as if swallowing something sharp. When she opened them, her voice had changed, no longer corporate, but resolute. "Gregory," she said, "do you have anything to say about this email?" Gregory looked around the table, desperate for an ally, but met only downturned eyes. That was an internal comment. It wasn't meant as policy," he stammered. "I was just reminding staff that we must maintain professionalism, not let social agendas interfere with operations." Charlotte cut him off, her voice slicing through the air. "And you think fairness isn't part of professionalism?" Gregory fell silent. At the far end of the table, Daniel Foster from Horizon Equity, the company's largest investor, spoke quietly. "We can fix this once, or keep pretending until it destroys us. The question is, which do we choose?" Charlotte nodded slowly. "A good question. I choose the truth." She turned to the legal counsel. "Prepare a full report, every complaint under Gregory's tenure. I want every case involving racial discrimination reopened, reviewed, and audited by an independent firm, publicly." The lawyers nodded. "Understood, ma'am." In the back, Darius remained silent, the glow from the screen reflecting off his face. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. His eyes shifted from Gregory to Madison, her face steady on the screen, lit not by pride but by the quiet radiance of someone who simply did the right thing. Justice, Darius thought, doesn't need applause. It just needs one person brave enough not to bow. The meeting stretched nearly 3 hours. When it finally ended, Charlotte stood and delivered the verdict. "We can't call this a one-flight mistake or the fault of a few employees. This isn't a glitch. It's a climate, a culture." Her gaze landed on Gregory. "I once believed you could lead this company, but you've been protecting its image, not its integrity." No one objected, and just like that, Gregory Shaw was suspended right there in front of the entire board. He left the room slowly, the sound of his leather shoes echoing across the glass hallway each step, a reminder that privilege offers no shelter from truth. Madison was still on the screen when Charlotte turned back. "Ms. Clark, you did what most people in this company wouldn't dare. The board will ensure your protection, and I'd like you to join our task force to rebuild passenger and staff training programs." Madison smiled faintly. "Thank you, ma'am. I just want us to learn how to see people without needing to see color." When the meeting adjourned, Darius walked out into the long corridor. The afternoon sun poured through the frosted glass, stretching across the floor in long, golden lines like the first traces of change. He paused by the window, looking down at the city taxis, crosswalks, the billboards still flashing the company slogan, "Above all, we care." For the first time, the words didn't sting, because now, maybe someone inside that building finally understood what they meant. No one wins in this, he thought. Only a system that's finally forced to see itself not through glass, but through a mirror. And then he smiled. Not the smile of revenge, but the quiet one that comes when truth finally stands on its own and wrongdoing doesn't need to be punished, because it simply can't survive the light. Monday morning, the sky above Westport Bay hung gray and heavy, as if the city itself knew that something was about to end. At the top floor of Aurora Atlantic Airways headquarters, the board of directors convened an emergency meeting. No press, no cameras, no outsiders, just 8 of the most powerful people in the company and one empty chair at the end of the table. The chair where Gregory Shaw used to sit. That chair still held the faint warmth of power, but no one wanted to claim it now. Charlotte Pierce, the board chair, opened the session with a single, simple line. "We've all seen what silence costs. It's time to speak." No one replied. Dim morning light washed over tense faces. Some lowered their eyes to reread the report Madison Clark had sent overnight, a full log of buried complaints and the now infamous internal email from Gregory himself. Charlotte's voice carried across the room. "Before we begin, let's make this clear. This is no longer about a seat in first class. It's about the culture of this company." Daniel Foster from Horizon Equity broke the stillness. Stocks down 25% in 3 days. The media's circling like sharks. Investors want a leadership change. If we keep defending Gregory, we won't just lose the company. We'll lose the brand. Another director, older, weary, added quietly, and we'll lose our dignity. There wasn't much left to debate. Charlotte laid a paper on the table. At the top, bold print read, "Vote of confidence, Gregory Shaw. Yes, no, no speeches, no arguments. Just the quiet scrape of pens on paper, the soft, final sound of a door closing on an era." When the ballots were collected, Charlotte read them aloud. 7 votes of no confidence, 1 abstention. She set the paper down. Then it's unanimous. Gregory Shaw is removed from his position as CEO, effective immediately. No applause, no sighs of relief. Only the silence of a room that had just witnessed justice, not loud, not triumphant, just inevitable. Charlotte turned toward the doorway, where Darius Cole stood waiting. The light from the window caught the sharp lines of his black suit, casting his face in quiet composure. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "please come in." He stepped inside, carrying nothing but a thin folder and the calm of a man who came not to win, but to finish what needed to be finished. Charlotte spoke first, The board has reviewed all evidence, the video, the internal reports. We've agreed that your proposed framework is the only path forward if Aurora Atlantic hopes to regain public trust." She glanced around the table. "We are officially approving the full Darius Cole framework, consisting of termination of the Flight 1857 crew, mandatory company-wide racial awareness training, independent audit of all passenger handling data from the past 24 months, and the establishment of the Air Travel Equality Initiative, a $50 million fund." A board member leaned forward. "Mr. Cole, would you consider joining the board permanently? We believe that seat belongs to you now." Darius shook his head gently. "I appreciate that, but justice doesn't sit at the same table as power. If I'm in here, I'll have to compromise. Out there, I can remind you why this happened in the first place." His words landed like truth, pure and heavy. Even Charlotte allowed herself a faint, knowing smile, the kind that only comes from hearing something absolutely right. "Then we'll appoint you as independent advisor for ethics and air equality, reporting directly to the board. No interference from executives, no filters through PR." Darius nodded once. "As long as I'm allowed to tell the truth even when it's inconvenient." "That," Charlotte replied, "is exactly what we need." At the far end of the table, Madison Clark sat quietly, barely daring to breathe. She hadn't expected to be here in a room where every nod could alter the course of an entire corporation. Charlotte turned toward her. Her tone softened, but her words carried weight. "Ms. Clark, the board has decided to create a new division, Passenger Advocacy and Accountability. We'd like you to lead it." Madison blinked, stunned. "Me? I'm just an entry-level employee." Charlotte smiled. "You're the only one in this company who did the right thing when everyone else stayed silent." Across the table, Darius's eyes softened. Sometimes, he thought, justice doesn't need heroes, it just needs someone who doesn't look away. Madison swallowed hard, tears gathering, but her voice held steady. "Then I accept. On one condition, full access to passenger and staff data, no filters, no approval chains." Charlotte nodded. "You'll have it." The meeting adjourned. Outside, the rain had just stopped. Pavement gleamed silver under the morning light. Darius walked beside Charlotte toward the lobby. She spoke quietly, not looking at him. "You know, if it hadn't been for that video, we would have still believed this system worked." "No," Darius said, "it never worked. People just didn't want to admit it was broken." They stopped before the glass wall, where the Aurora Atlantic logo shimmered under fresh light. This time, it didn't reflect Gregory Shaw's face, but a different generation's people, learning that real strength isn't about command, but about listening. I remember the look in Darius's eyes as he walked away from that building. No pride, no vengeance, just the peace of a man who'd won without stepping on anyone to do it. "When people look down on you," he once said, "remember they're only measuring their own height." That evening, headlines lit up every news feed. Aurora Atlantic appoints independent advisor for air justice, whistleblower promoted to lead passenger rights division. Justice can fly, and this time, it's sitting in first class. 6 months had passed since Aurora Atlantic Airways launched its Air Travel Equality Initiative. The company's glass tower in Westport Bay no longer stood as a monument to scandal, but to rebirth. Where once the lobby walls reflected shame and denial, now a new engraving shimmered beneath the morning light. "Respect takes flight," when we remember we all belong in the sky. No ceremony, no fireworks, no CEO speeches, just an ordinary June morning. As Madison Clark walked through those doors with a new nameplate on her chest, Director of Passenger Advocacy and Accountability. She still wore the same scuffed shoes, still sipped cheap coffee from the corner cafe. But the way people greeted her had changed. They didn't just say hi. They said, "That's Madison, the woman who changed this place." Meanwhile, Aurora Atlantic did the unthinkable. It became the most trusted airline in America. The press called it a miracle born from a meltdown. Competitors like Sky North, Blue Haven, and Continental Air reached out to Darius Cole's Air Travel Equality Fund, asking to join forces. Within 6 months, 17 airlines across the U.S. had signed on, raising the total fund to over $210 million. But Darius didn't brag. He turned down every TV interview, every magazine cover. When a journalist asked why he wouldn't embrace his moment of glory, he simply replied, "Justice isn't a spotlight. It's the kind of light that helps people see where they actually stand." That afternoon, in his modest Quantum Sage Technologies office, Darius received 3 unexpected visitors, 3 names from a story he thought had already ended. The first was Captain Robert Ellison, the man who'd once ordered him off seat 1A. His posture was stiffer, hair grayer, eyes humbled. In his hand was a thick envelope. "Not money," he said quietly. "Letters from the entire crew. Lauren and Chloe both signed them. Darius opened it. The handwriting was messy, unpolished but real. We didn't see the person. We only saw the color. And that was wrong." He folded the pages carefully and set them on the desk. Robert hesitated, then added, "I stepped down from flying. I train new pilots now. Every month, I tell this story. They call it the 1A lesson." Darius nodded slowly. If a man can face his mistake, then there's still hope for the world. The second visitor was Chloe Sanders, the flight attendant who'd spoken to him with icy formality that morning. No red lipstick now, no sharp heels, just quiet sincerity. She didn't sit. Her voice trembled. "I lost my job, but I found a new one at a support center for discrimination claims. When someone says they've been disrespected, I don't ask." "Are you sure anymore?" I ask. "How can I help?" Darius studied her face. There was something in her voice that hadn't been there on Flight 1857 Truth. And he knew. This time, silence was enough. Forgiveness didn't need to be spoken. The final visitor stopped him cold. Bradley Carter, the white businessman who had taken seat 1A. He looked nothing like the man from that flight. A cheap suit, loosened tie, tired eyes. He lingered at the door, almost afraid to step in. "I lost my job at Crescent Ridge Financial," he said softly. "They said I damaged the firm's reputation. But I know the truth. I did that myself." Darius said nothing. Bradley continued, voice cracking slightly. "I've watched that video over and over. I wasn't a bad person, just a blind one. I want to change that. I've started teaching a course on privilege awareness at a community college in Harbor City. If you'll allow it, I'd like to use this story, our story, as a lesson." The office was utterly silent. The only sound was the tick of the clock. Then Darius rose and extended his hand. No grand speech, no absolution. Just a handshake firm. Brief, final. Forgiveness. I thought, watching him, isn't erasing the wrong. It's letting the wrong be seen in the light. When the 3 left, Darius stood alone. He walked to the window, gazing out at the city below, a skyline alive with hundreds of departing flights, each carrying passengers of every color, class, and story, all bound by the same sky. Below, a new billboard at Harbor City Terminal glowed against the dusk. Justice doesn't need to be loud, it just needs a place to sit. Darius smiled, not out of triumph, but of quiet understanding. Because at last, he knew silent justice had taken flight, and this time, there was room for everyone. 3 months after Aurora Atlantic announced its Air Travel Equality Fund, Darius Cole returned to the cover of Fortune magazine, not as a victim, but as a man who had turned injustice into a foundation for something greater. The headline was just 3 words: grace under pressure. That morning, the 47th floor of Kingsbridge Capitol in London was awash in pale blue fog. Darius stepped out of the elevator, dark suit, silver tie, steady eyes. Inside the glass conference room, 6 investors waited, the same ones who had once debated whether to invest $300 million in his company. Quantum Sage Technologies. This time, no one mentioned the flight. They didn't need to. Everyone knew, and every pair of eyes on him carried no doubt, only quiet curiosity. How does a man stay that calm when the world expects him to break? Howard Kemp, Kingsbridge's chairman, spoke first. "Mr. Cole, we followed everything that's happened. The way you handle that crisis, no lawsuits, no outrage, just precision and principle prove something. You're not just a CEO. You're a leader of your generation." He paused, then added, "Which is why we've decided to raise our investment from $300 to $450 million. Silence filled the room. 1 second. 2. Darius simply nodded. No smile, no shock, just calm resolve. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'll turn that trust into something no one ever has to apologize for healing." From that day, Quantum Sage Technologies grew faster than anyone could predict. Its AI medical system, Helios, expanded across hospitals in New York, Toronto, Nairobi, and Tokyo. Helios didn't just analyze medical data, it learned to detect bias in diagnosis, the kind of bias even humans fail to see. It didn't care if a patient was rich or poor, black or white. To Helios, all blood runs red. The press called it a form of digital justice, but Darius never used that phrase. He talked only about accuracy and empathy, 2 forces that rarely coexist, yet somehow did in his hands. That Friday afternoon, Darius stood on the rooftop of Quantum Sage's Newark office, looking out toward the city where he'd grown up. In the distance, he could still see the small church where his father once preached. He remembered the man's deep voice saying, "Years ago, you'll have to be twice as good just to make it halfway. But when you go far enough, son, you'll realize you don't need to beat anyone. You just need to beat yourself." Darius smiled faintly. "Maybe you were right, Dad. I didn't beat them. I just beat the anger inside me." A month later, at the Global Health Summit in Geneva, Darius was invited to speak. The hall was packed: scientists, entrepreneurs, diplomats. He stepped up to the podium. No slides, no notes, just his voice calm, deliberate. Technology alone can't save the world, but it can remind us that everyone deserves to be saved. No one clapped right away. The silence that followed wasn't hesitation, it was reverence, the kind that settles when people realize they've just heard something true. That same year, the Helios project received international medical certification. Governments placed orders, and the Atlantic published a headline that read, "Darius Cole turns personal humiliation into global reform." But Darius never mentioned the humiliation. He didn't have to. The world remembered it for him. When asked about it, he'd simply say, "I wasn't pushed out of my seat. I was taught where to stand." Back in Newark, his old high school renamed its computer lab the Cole Learnin' Lab, where the first group of black students began learning AI programming for free. Madison Clark stood beside him at the dedication. When the host asked if she had anything to say, Madison smiled toward Darius. "That day, I just did what was right," she said. But he made right something the whole world could feel. Darius didn't reply. He only bowed his head slightly, a silent thank you. Later that evening, after everyone had gone, he lingered in the empty classroom. On the whiteboard, a student had scribbled a sentence in uneven handwriting, "AI can't judge your skin." He looked at it for a long time, then laughed softly. If justice had a shape, he thought, maybe it would look like that a child's crooked handwriting. Simple, honest, true. As night fell, the lights from the Quantum Sage Tower shimmered across the skyline like a beacon. No one knew what Darius was thinking as he watched. Maybe he was remembering Seat 1A. Maybe he was thinking about the flights yet to come. But one thing was certain. He had gone farther than any airplane ever could. "I didn't seek revenge," he once said. "I built a world where revenge isn't needed. And in that world, justice doesn't shout. It just needs one person brave enough to stay silent until the truth speaks for itself." Autumn in Harbor City carried the scent of sea wind mixed with steel from the airport runways. Inside the newly renovated terminal of Aurora Atlantic, hundreds of people gathered around a simple wooden stage bearing the words "Aviation Equality Forum," where every seat matters. In the center stood Darius Cole, facing the microphone, no suit, no tie, just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up less like a CEO, more like a professor. In the front row sat Madison Clark, beside Charlotte Pierce, Howard Kemp, and executives from rival airlines. Behind them were pilots, flight attendants, ground staff people who usually worked in the background, now sitting shoulder to shoulder, silent and attentive. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass panels, casting a pale glow across Darius's face. He looked down at a folded sheet of paper in his hand, but didn't read it. "A year ago," he began, voice calm and low, "I was asked to leave Seat 1A on one of this airline's flights. The room stilled. In that moment, I could have shouted. I could have fought. I could have made everyone in that cabin afraid, but I chose silence." He paused, glancing toward the runway outside where a plane was lifting into the sky. "Because I realized sometimes what needs to take flight isn't the person. It's their dignity." He told the story simply not as a victim, but as a witness. A small moment, a seat, a look, a mistake, but that small moment had forced an entire system to see itself clearly for the first time. "People think justice happens in courts or parliaments," Darius said, "but often it starts with someone brave enough to say, 'This is wrong.' Madison Clark did that. And because of her, one airline changed, and an entire industry began again." Madison lowered her head, eyes glistening, not from pride but because truth was finally being spoken out loud. Behind him, a screen came to life playing a short video from Aurora Atlantic's new Empathy at Altitude training. It showed new recruits, pilots, and attendants listening to passengers share stories of discrimination. No barriers, no us and them, just people learning to see one another. When the video faded, Darius spoke again, softer now, as if to himself. Dignity isn't a seat you can upgrade to. You either have it or you don't. It's not printed on a boarding pass or earned with a loyalty card. It lives in how you treat someone, especially when you think they have no right to ask for respect. The room was completely still. Even the hum of aircraft outside seemed to fall in rhythm with his words. He looked upward, beyond the lights, as though seeing something far away, maybe the red brick streets of Eastbridge, maybe the small church where his father once placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You'll have to be twice as good to get halfway there." Back then, Darius hadn't understood. Now he did. He wasn't teaching me how to outdo others, he thought. He was teaching me how not to sink to the level of their hatred. Darius took a breath. The day I was moved to row 34, I thought I was fallen, but that's where I learned to stand with reason, not rage. Had I reacted differently, this story would have ended as a lawsuit. Instead, it became a reform. He turned toward the rows of new employees. Every time you step into that cabin, remember the person in front of you isn't just a passenger. They're someone's story, someone's hope, someone's fear, someone's parent trying to get home. Never measure a soul by their seat. Madison rose to her feet and began to clap. Slowly, the sound spread through the hall, soft at first, then steady, deep, and warm. Charlotte Pierce bowed her head, tears slipping down her cheek. When she looked up at Darius, she whispered, "You've made justice learn how to fly." He smiled gently. "No," he said. "I just opened the door. Justice already knew how." That evening, as he left the terminal, Darius stopped by the glass walkway overlooking the runway. An Aurora Atlantic jet was preparing for takeoff, its logo now carrying a small new tagline. "Every seat has a story." He watched until it disappeared into the horizon. In the reflection, he saw his own face, not the man once forced from seat 1A, but the man who'd opened thousands of 1As for people who'd never been invited to sit there before. "I've come a long way," he thought. "But what matters most is that others can go even farther, because today, no one stopped at the gate." Far across the tarmac, the streetlights caught a new billboard shining in gold letters. "Dignity is not an upgrade. You either have it or you don't." Darius slipped his hands into his pockets and smiled faintly. Then he turned and walked slowly down the quiet concourse. As the PA system echoed overhead, Flight 1857 to Crownport is now ready for departure. This time, no one was asked to move seats. Thank you for staying with us until the end of today's story. If you felt something about justice, about calm, or simply the belief that human dignity can never be taken away, then this video has fulfilled its purpose. On this channel, we tell real stories about people, about respect, and about how intelligence can overcome anger. If you, too, believe that justice doesn't need to shout it, only needs the truth, please like, share this video so more people can see it, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next episode of Silent Justice, because every share from you might be the chance for someone somewhere to finally see their own true worth. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next story.